Hello and welcome. My name is Brian Kaplan, editor of The Banker. I'm here today with Sir David Walker, the former chairman of both Barclays and Morgan Stanley International, and we're talking about the G30 report on banking conduct and culture. Sir David, welcome. And I assume that the thing is, obviously what you've described is it's quite a thoroughgoing process, so it's just not enough for the board to say, we've ticked the culture box. They actually have to be satisfied that it's permeated throughout the organisation. And I think you talk in the report very much about, sometimes it doesn't get past the middle managers. So the board have taken it on board, but it hasn't got down far enough in the organisation.
I wouldn't want to let the boards cop out either. I think it's very important that the board proactively and continuously address reputation as a serious board accountability. And I think this has not to be defensive, but proactive. And part of that, I think, is being satisfied that there is provision for board-level attention to reputation, conduct, and to the culture that's being established on a regular basis. Meetings 4 times a year, whether it's of the whole board on this subject with good management information or a dedicated board committee. Each bank, each board will determine how they want to do it. But it needs to be continuous proactive board attention, sitting atop executive accountability.
Okay, now there's obviously been a huge amount of attention given to bankers' pay during the crisis, and pay is something that you do raise in the report, isn't it, as a way of sanctioning people that get it wrong. So how instrumental is pay, do you think, to this?
I think it's very instrumental, but I think it's only a part of the process. The other ingredients, the other building blocks have to be in place. I think the starting point is a system of performance appraisal of individuals in which, there'll be many areas for measurement, but the particular areas for focus I want to mention here are to get the right balance between the what the individual is doing, let's say in terms of generating revenue, generating margin, doing well for the shareholders in a financial sense, and the how this individual is behaving. And that how the individual is behaving relates not only to clients, counterparties externally, but how he behaves internally vis-à-vis colleagues. And the view we took in the steering group is that if you don't get the right culture internally, the right behaviours within an organisation, and it could be the banker or the Financial Times or a bank, you can't expect to have a good behaviour vis-à-vis outside stakeholders. So all these parts fit together. And having done a performance appraisal that assesses an individual's performance in terms of the how as well as the what, then the comp, the remuneration, can be calibrated, and it needs to be visible, transparent, and known to everybody that this is the system, and that if you do very well on the how but falter on the what for a time, you'll be perhaps penalised to some extent, but symmetrically, if you do very well on the what but don't behave well, you'll certainly be penalised.
Okay, now in the UK we're going to have a new regime. It's called the Senior Managers Regime. It's coming in March 2016. So I'm interested to know how you think that dovetails with the study's recommendations. But also, when I talk to bankers, they are very worried about the Senior Managers Regime and some of the elements to it, particularly the fact that they feel the burden of proof has been reversed, so they actually have to demonstrate that they did the right things rather than a regulator saying, okay, no, you're guilty, you didn't do the right things.
The proposition that executives who can materially influence the risk-taking and success of an enterprise should have really serious individual accountability seems to me to be unanswerable. And bottom line, I would say I am supportive of the proposals and think they're totally in line with the sort of recommendations being made in this think piece by the Group of 30. The question is how the system works in practice. And I understand the apprehension felt by many executives and some board members about along the lines of, well, I'm now very exposed. How can I protect myself in a way that doesn't glue up the works and inhibit entrepreneurial decision-taking, which we need in banking as we do in other areas of business. So I think the test will be the way in which On the one side, the regulators operate the new regime, and there will need to be judgment and sensitivity as well as toughness in that. And I think it's really important alongside that boards and senior executives get the message that the sort of, in many ways, loose, unaccountable conduct that in some instances, perhaps many instances, preceded the global financial crisis in banks is not going to be tolerated in future. And the first port of call in terms of addressing that problem is the board and the executive committee of a bank. And if that's being got right within the board and the executive committee, my expectation is there will be very little problem with the new regime that's being put in place by the regulators here in the UK.